You look back at who you were 6 months ago and barely recognize them. The things they cared about, the people they wanted to be around, the version of the future they were building toward. It all feels like someone else's life. And you don't know whether that means you're growing or whether there's something in you that simply cannot hold a shape. Problem Deep Dive. You've started over more than once. New interests that consumed you completely, then quietly disappeared. New social circles that felt like finally, then slowly became suffocating. New versions of yourself you were certain about until you weren't. People around you seem to stay. They have consistent tastes, consistent friendships, a consistent sense of who they are. And you wonder why you can't do what they seem to do without thinking. This experience has a name in psychology. Researchers call it identity diffusion, a state where the self lacks a stable, integrated core. It was first mapped by the developmental psychologist Erik Erikson, who proposed that identity isn't something you're born with. It's something the psyche constructs. And for some people, that construction never fully settles. But here is what matters. The unsettled self is not the broken self. It is often the searching self. Reframe. What you experience as instability may actually be something else. Psychologists who study personality change have found that some individuals score high on a trait called openness to experience. High openness means your nervous system is genuinely wired to seek novelty, to absorb new ideas, to update and revise your internal model of the world. It is not a flaw in your architecture. It is a feature. One that, without the right framework, feels indistinguishable from falling apart. You are not someone who can't commit. You are someone who keeps growing past the containers you've been placed into. Psychological mechanism. Let's go inside the brain for a moment. Neuroscientists have identified a network called the default mode network, the set of brain regions most active when you're not focused on an external task. It's the network that runs when you daydream, when you reflect, when you ask, who am I and what do I want? Research shows that people with high self-reflection and high openness show more activity in this network, more internal conversation, more constant self-revision. The brain, in other words, keeps reopening the file. Psychologist Dan McAdams calls this the narrative self. The idea that identity isn't a fixed object. It's a story you are always in the middle of writing. The problem isn't that your story keeps changing. The problem is that you've been told a good self is one that doesn't. Practical framework. 4 principles for living well inside a self that moves. 1. Distinguish between values and preferences. Preferences change. And they should. The music you love, the work that excites you, the people you want near you, these are allowed to shift. But beneath preferences live values. What you believe makes a good life. How you want to treat people. What you're unwilling to compromise. When you feel lost, don't ask, who am I? Ask, what do I still believe, no matter who I'm becoming? That question reaches deeper, and it usually has an answer. 2. Stop using continuity as the measure of health. Psychological research on personality development shows that growth is not linear. It involves what researchers call disequilibrium, periods of temporary incoherence that precede a more integrated self. The discomfort you feel between versions of yourself is not evidence that something is wrong. It is the feeling of reconstruction. 3. Build identity through action, not reflection alone. The philosopher and psychologist William James argued that identity is not discovered through introspection. It is built through commitment, through small, repeated choices that accumulate into a self over time. You don't find out who you are by thinking about it. You find out by doing something and noticing what remains true after the novelty fades. 4. Let the past versions stay. Every person you've been contains information about you. The phase that passed quickly still told you something real. The interest that faded still shaped the way you think. You are not a series of failed selves. You are a palimpsest, a document written over and over again, where the old words still show through. Integration. Here is the model to carry with you. Most people imagine identity as a statue. Fixed, finished, carved once, and permanent. But yours is more like a river. A river doesn't lose its identity because it moves. It is its movement. It has a consistent direction, consistent banks, a consistent source. What changes is the surface. What remains is the current. Your values are the current. Everything else is allowed to flow. Quiet, empowering close. You are not someone who can't hold a shape. You are someone whose shape includes movement. The people who seem certain and settled, many of them stopped asking the questions you are still asking. That is not their strength. It is the question you haven't stopped asking that keeps making you more. The version of you 6 months from now will look back at today and see someone in the middle of something.